Today I want to share with you a quick snippet of information about counters on SAP Enable Now book pages. I'm going to show this example here, which is actually using a template that I use to create a task. I kind of stole the format of this from SAP tutorials because it's kind of a nice way of organizing information. So I'll play this and I'll show you what I want to happen in here. So I'm going into preview. The user starts this task and then it gives them instructions on things that they need to do. And there are 10 steps. As they complete each step, they click on the next button and it colors in the step they've already completed and goes on to the next step. So now I see the step 2 instructions and I click through, step 2's done, see the step 3 instructions, all the way down here, just one step at a time. It walks them through how to do it. And the way I've got this set up is I've got a counter that counts the number of clicks on the next button and shows the step instructions and colors in the steps that have been visited already based on how many clicks there's been. So once they've clicked on it once, it's going to color in step 1, etc., etc., etc. The problem with this is that a counter object in SAP Enable Now can only count up to 8. This is my counter steps completed, part 1. And it can count from 1 or it can count to any number, but you can only have 8 settings for it or 8 triggers when it reaches a certain number. But I've got 10 steps. So how do I do that? Effectively, I just create a second counter control, and then that one is the one that's going to trigger steps 9 and 10. What I've done is on my next button here, you can see that my action is to count up on steps completed part 1 and steps completed part 2. So it will count up on both of those at the same time. And then in theory, for my steps completed part 2, when it reaches 9 and when it reaches 10 to trigger those next 2. But that's not how it works. If I go and look at my steps completed part 2, I have a count 1 and a count 2. Because what seems to happen, if I go back to my next button, is it will perform all of these counting up on part 1, and only when it's reached the end of that will it then start counting up part 2. And we can see this if I play it back. So let me run through that again and let's see what's happening here. I'll preview, I'll start my task. Now, as I click on my next button, you'll see my first counter here, my steps completed part 1. You'll see that it does count up. It will show you which one has now been triggered. So as I click next, you can see it's triggered 1. And I go to 2, it's triggered 2, and then all the way through. All the way to 8. But now watch what happens. When I click next again, it goes on to step 9, but now it's gone on to steps completed part 2 and it's triggered 1 on that. Not 9, but 1. And when I click the next one, it then triggers 2 on that, not 10. So again, the important thing here to note is that you can absolutely have more than 8 steps. You need to set them up to be counted at the same time on the part 1 and the part 2, and you could have as many of these as you need. But the important thing is that the second one still needs to start at 1, not at 9. Because again, when I click on my next button, even though I have both of these being counted up at the same time, it does not seem to actually start counting up on part 2 until it has finished all of the steps in part 1. So if you need to count beyond 8, this is the way to do it. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.